With the Juneteenth celebration, first of all, it's coming in the aftermath of the Civil War. And of course, with the Civil War started 1861 to 1865. And the central issue of the Civil War, the central reality of the Civil War, is the issue of slavery. You know, some people try to suggest, oh, it's about economics, it's about, but slavery was economic. Slaves were property. So consequently, with the conclusion of the war, prior to the conclusion of the war, Abraham Lincoln understood eventually that in order to get the country back together, we needed to end slavery. It shows you that this is not a war to free slaves. This is a war about power, really, and slaves are part of that power dynamic. Lincoln eventually began to understand, if I want to defeat this enemy, this internal enemy, I've got to destroy the institution of slavery, which is propping it up. So consequently, he issued a preliminary Emancipation Proclamation in 1862. And so he gave slave masters, this is very interesting, he gave slave masters 100 days. Put down your arms, stop fighting against the United States, and you can keep your slaves. Nobody took him up on it. So we wait until a more opportune time. We wait until after a Union victory, and he issues the Emancipation Proclamation, January 1st, 1863. So we're going to free slaves. So the reality, however, is that the word didn't get to everybody. And the last place it got to was in Texas. And in fact, June 19th, where you get Juneteenth from, is when the last slaves find out, hey, you know what, we're supposed to be free. So that's coming about in 1865 with Juneteenth, and hence the Juneteenth celebrations supporting that. Just like any other facet of American history, it's to be celebrated, but the first step is to learn about it. And that's one of the things that I think we collectively need to do a better job of, not just white Americans or other ethnic groups. Everybody needs to learn the collective history because it's all interrelated. I really think that just as they study any other facet of American history, if you want to understand American history, you have to understand the collective history, and that means studying groups that don't look like you. I don't ever recall being taught about Juneteenth. I just sort of knew about it, particularly because my father is from Texas. I always heard about it as to what it signified. A lot of the history, again, like I'm telling you, was not taught. We didn't traverse those particular subjects. We did stuff that was very, very general. To understand Juneteenth, you really need to understand the coming of the Civil War and the Civil War itself. A great book that you can get in one volume, or they've broken it up into 3 separate volumes that are smaller, is a book entitled Ordeal by Fire. I believe it's by James McPherson. Ordeal by Fire, the first in the 3 volumes, the coming of the Civil War, and then Reconstruction. And so that's one general source I think could help people understand what's leading toward Juneteenth. The Era of Reconstruction by Kenneth Stampp is a very good book. I mean, there's so many, but to really get a true understanding of the Civil War, I think that's where people should start, and then you can go afterward. When you think about it, you had the Civil War and then you had Reconstruction, the aftermath from 1865 to the election of 1876, or election of 1877, 76, 77. And so that's Reconstruction, that's the first Reconstruction. And guess what? We as Americans didn't learn this history, and then we had to do it all over again in the 1960s. So we had a lot of work to do as a nation. So we did it all over again. People died and for the very rights that we'd already fought for in the 1960s. And hopefully we don't have to do that with a third Reconstruction again as we fight about voting rights and so forth as we go forward. So a lot of books, I think one should read things on Reconstruction as well. There are a number of books in that area. They're really numerous. I can talk all day about those. And, I'm really thankful that you've given me this opportunity to share a little bit about this really wonderful, I say wonderful, a wonderful part of a history, because it's the beginning and it's the end. It was the end of slavery, which led to celebrations, and it was, the end, but it really was the beginning of that next part of the story of the fight for freedom. So that's where we are. Again, that's something we always have to do collectively as Americans, fight for that freedom, because it's something you take for granted that could lead us down a path. Remember, in the aftermath of this war, you had what are known as black codes that came about. And in Florida, black codes were very oppressive. So that's what people need to read about and study that as well. So our history helps inform us on how to meet challenges today, and it also helps us understand where we've come from and why we're where we are at the present moment. So it's a roadmap for the future, and if we respect it, we'll be fine. There used to be a sociologist by the name of Charles S. Johnson who used to have a saying that he liked: if you know well the beginning, the end will not trouble you much.